Hi, my friends. Welcome to Deep Six, the Deep State, my daily commentary on the news of the week, and in this case, the news of the weekend and Monday. Sorry for the different time. I'm taping this at 11 o'clock in the morning because I have some meetings in the city today. So you'll still see it at 4 o'clock if you wish, or anytime from 11 on. I'm live now. There's an earthquake headed for Capitol Hill, which should hit sometime this week or early next week, which is the testimony of William Campbell, the FBI informant who spent years, I believe 6 years, infiltrating the uranium industry in the United States and the various transportation and other firms that were engaged. His front was that he was a lobbyist for the Russian government on, I believe, I'm not sure what, I think probably on the uranium deal. But in fact, he was an undercover informant for the FBI who kept meticulous track of the various bribes and extortions and attempts at coercion that underpinned the Russian effort to get control of our uranium supply, or at least 20% of it. Of course, that effort culminated in the super bribe of Bill Clinton by paying him $500,000 to give a speech in Russia before an entity that was largely controlled by the Kremlin, and by the donations, the huge donations exceeding $100 million that were given to the Clinton Foundation. And I believe in response to these bribes, Hillary voted in favor of the sale of the uranium assets to Rosatom, which is was a Russian-controlled energy agency, the government nuclear agency. When Hillary did this, she claimed, and now claims, that she had nothing to do with the approving the sale. She wasn't at the meeting, and somebody else, one of her deputies, cast that vote, which is, of course, disingenuous. As Secretary of State, she was the head of this effort and in charge of this committee, and her judgment prevailed, and there was no indication of the bribery that underscored it. This comes at a time when Sessions, the AG, is seriously considering naming a special prosecutor to investigate the uranium deal in this whole process. And he says that there's not enough evidence yet to make this a slam dunk decision, and he's asking his assistant attorney generals to weigh in on it. But in light of the testimony we can expect from Campbell, it is a slam dunk decision, because the testimony Campbell will likely give will, on the one hand, implicate the Clintons in this pay-for-play scheme, but on the other hand will implicate Mueller, the existing special prosecutor, because of his failure to divulge this information or to indicate that there was such an investigation underway. And he did this before any word of this leaked out. Peter Schweizer wrote the best-selling book Clinton Cash, one of the real classics of political literature these days. And he first revealed this uranium pay-for-play scheme and of the Russian bribes to former President Clinton. But while that was going on, while the bribery was taking place, while Hillary was casting these votes, or a representative was, while all of the evidence was building up that this is a subject of bribery and of intense interest by the Russians, Mueller was silent. He didn't say anything. It didn't come out in public. And then after the Schweizer book was published, he was still silent, and so was Comey, his successor at the FBI. And throughout the whole general election, when the intelligence agencies were screaming at the top of their lungs about Russian meddling in the U.S. election, nobody gave a peep about the Russian bribery efforts and what we knew about it, which was, of course, the real collusion, in this case, between the Clintons and the Kremlin. So all of this will make it very hard for Mueller to continue as special prosecutor. And while he probably will not be removed, he'll be sidelined to a great extent. And this investigation, which will implicate Mueller as well as the Clintons, probably is going to go forward as the most important of these investigations. Now, while all this is going on, Hillary has denounced the uranium investigation as a political stunt by the Trump administration, some political stunt. And she keeps saying this has all been adjudicated. Well, it hasn't been, and investigated, and it hasn't been. It needs to be. At about this time, Paula Jones came out and talked about the charges that she made against Bill Clinton. And a lot of the Democrats are jumping ship on Clinton and saying that his actions so discredited the Democratic Party that they led to Trump's election. And especially with the Al Franken scandal now entering its second week with an allegation that he actually harassed a woman while he was serving in the Senate, the charges surrounding Bill Clinton become more and more relevant. And those clearly are becoming essential elements of the public discourse once again. Now, Paula Jones, Hillary Clinton implied that Paula Jones misremembered, that's her phrase, borrowed probably from Bush, what happened during the Clinton administration. And then disingenuously he said, this has all been adjudicated, this has all been judged, it's all been settled, it's old news. Well, let's remember how it was settled. In his closing days in office, Bill Clinton pled nolo contendere, the equivalent of guilty, to the charge of perjury in his deposition in the Paula Jones case, where he tried to conceal his relationship with Monica Lewinsky. And for that evasion and that perjury, Clinton was fined $1 million that he had to pay to Paula Jones, $1 million, lost his law license, and has a nolo contendere on his record. That, of course, didn't stop him from making hundreds of millions of dollars in speaking fees, but it certainly indicates the severity of the accusation. And Hillary's role in trying to cover for it, trying to call, I believe James Carville said, this is what happens when you drag a $100 bill through a trailer park. You get trash like Paula Jones coming out with made-up stories that ultimately turn out to be completely true and to Bill Clinton's everlasting disgrace. But it's time to revisit some of that and remember what this guy did. I swear to you, there were times when several times, I was in the White House with President Clinton, and he turned to me in a rage, and he said, this story about me and Paula Jones never happened. I don't know this woman. I never met this woman. I have no idea who she is. I wouldn't know her from Adam or Eve. I have absolutely no idea who she is or what this is all about. And he does it with a fervor and a vigor and a certitude that even I almost believed him. I didn't, because I knew what a liar he was and all the other sex scandals. I used to say Hillary lies about everything, Bill lies about sex. But you could have sworn this, and probably he would have passed a lie detector test at that moment, because his blood pressure was such that he was absolutely telling the truth, except for the fact that he wasn't. And Hillary covered it up for him, just as she covered up his sexual harassment and affair of Jennifer Flowers, just as she covered up his groping of Kathleen Willey in the Oval Office, just as she covered up all of the sex scandals during his administration, and frankly during their marriage and his public career. One other note at the end of this scandal: the Clinton Foundation, for some mysterious reason, has had its donations fall off by 80%, 40% the year before last, and another 40% this past year. What's obviously true is that Clintons no longer have power. She's no longer Secretary of State. She's no longer a shoo-in to be the next president. And people are, for some reason, reconsidering their charitable giving. The impulse to generosity and giving seems somehow to have been attenuated and held in check. And for some reason, people aren't writing checks. And the reason is the entire foundation was foundationed on bribery in return for favors. And now that the Clintons can't do any favors, people are holding their checkbooks and sitting on them.
So, Dick, yesterday when I posted the announcement that you were going to be changing your time, a bunch of your loyal followers posted questions, so I hope you don't mind my asking. But Eric Lawson, because some of them will be off topic, but Eric Lawson wants to know, what is going to come of William Campbell's testimony about Uranium-1 if he isn't suicided before he can testify?
Well, as Hillary Clinton would say, asked and answered. I think I covered that earlier.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm looking at the questions. And we have a question from Denise Shiley. She says, as someone who makes only $58,000 per year and no longer have dependents, I'm wondering if the new tax plan will benefit me, or for a broader question, what income levels will it be most beneficial to?
It'll benefit you significantly. 58,000. Did she say if she's married or single?
Single.
Single. Okay. So you'll get your income of 58,000, and right off the top, you'll be able to deduct 12,000 without itemizing anything. So it'll bring your income down to 45,000, 46,000. And your bracket will drop, part of it will drop. I would say that overall you will have a tax savings. Oh, and does she have children?
Well, no dependents. You know what? She didn't say she was married. She says no longer has dependents.
Okay,
So,
well, if you're married and you file jointly, take that income down another 12 to 33,000. I think you'll have a very big tax cut. My own estimate, just having heard that, is that it will probably be on the order of a savings of $2,000 or $3,000 on your tax bill.
Excellent. And Barry Brown asks, is Jeff Sessions under the thumb of the deep state now? He's been acting very odd lately.
He was. I think now to a certain extent he's not. What Sessions is doing is he's saying, I won't name a special prosecutor unless you force me. Because if you don't force me, people will say you're just doing it because you're political, you're a Republican, you're doing this for Trump. But if you force me and the evidence is clearly there, and I'm seen resisting it until you twist my arm enough, the appointment will have credibility. After all, if a special prosecutor does not have credibility, it's very hard for them to get indictments or convictions out of a jury. So I think Sessions is dealing with that problem, and I think at the moment he's doing so fairly well. He knew that in letting Campbell testify, the FBI informant, he was going to open the floodgates to accusations at Robert Mueller, Hillary Clinton, and Bill Clinton in this uranium scandal. And he knew that he knows that will force him probably to name a special prosecutor, and he's begging to be forced.
Jill Bussum asks, she would like to know if you think Hillary will ever go to jail.
Well, it certainly is possible.
And she also wants to know, why are the Dems allowed to file impeachment papers, wasting our tax money on something that has no chance of moving forward?
No, any congressman can introduce any bill he wants.
Okay.
But it has no chance of moving forward. Now, I'm going to talk about Roy Moore in just a minute. But first I want to talk to you about a very significant development in the area of gold. As you know, these are sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. But even if it weren't sponsored, this would be very important news, earth-shaking news, really, in the way currencies are judged in the world. There is now a new credit card in effect, a debit card, called Glint, G-L-I-N-T, initially founded in the UK, but coming into wide use throughout the world. And the way it works is that you go to Glint and you give them an initial deposit on your debit card. Let's say you give them $5,000. And they then give you a line of credit of $5,000, like a debit card does. Not interest, you can take up to $5,000 out. Then, but after you put the money in, Glint automatically converts it either to gold or to any other national currency you want. They call them fiat currencies, which means the value doesn't come from gold, but because the government says it has that value and you believe it and credit it. Then when you go to buy something, your balance is articulated in terms of gold, which means it's secure and it probably has increased in value rather than shrinking because the dollar or other currencies shrink in value because of inflation. And so that you put in $5,000 in US dollars. Glint then converts that into $5,000 worth of gold. Gold appreciates, and now it's $5,500. When you go to use the card, Glint says, do you want to pay in gold or in euros or in dollars or whatever? If you choose dollars, gold has increased to $5,500, and you then spend up to $5,500. You got the extra $500 in your account, and you're guaranteed against the dollar dropping in value, and you will ride any increase in value of gold or of any other currency relative to the dollar. In other words, just to make that a little simpler, it's as if you're walking around town with a gold converter coming with you, and one of those change booths. And you say, I want to buy this scarf, and it costs $200. And they go through it and they say, well, $200 equals X amount in gold, and therefore we're going to withdraw that amount from your account. And as the price of gold goes up and gold becomes more valuable, the number of dollars you have to spend drops. I hope I explained that right. Maybe I'll do another shot at it tomorrow. but it is a brand new concept. It basically means you can transform your holdings into gold instantly, automatically, at the market price, no commissions. And then when you spend the money, you can convert it back to dollars, back to euros, back to anything you want, or spend it in gold itself, all with a credit card. You never actually need to touch the gold. It's an incredible concept.
Does that include retirement, like a 401k, or?
Yeah, it includes, well, it's how you can use the money in retirement. Oh. It's just like a debit card. Right. But instead of you having access only to the debit card in dollars, you can get it in gold or any other currency. So, for example, if you're going shopping and the dollar just dropped against the euro,
right,
and all of a sudden the money you have in the account is worth more in euros than it would be worth in dollars, you can say, euros, please, and then you're taking advantage of that immediately.
Oh, wow.
Almost as if you're a currency trader who made that investment. And you can put it in any national currency you want or in gold.
Wow.
It's
okay.
kind of
Awesome.
incredible.
Wow.
It'll also increase the demand for gold, which will itself raise the price. Now, let's talk about Roy Moore a little bit. I know Moore. I like him. I met with him, had the honor of meeting with him and the pleasure. He's a great guy, for 3 or 4 hours when his candidacy was just developing. And I've supported him. You've heard me support him. I've written columns in his behalf. I've sent out mailings for him and all kinds of stuff like that. And I'm inclined to believe that these charges are at best exaggerated and in some cases made up. But that's not my concern right now. I don't care whether he's guilty or innocent. I don't care whether he did it or not. I have one concern. I want that seat to stay Republican. Because if he is defeated by a Democrat, the Democrat will break Trump's majority. We'll be down to 1 vote, which puts us at Rand Paul's mercy or Susan Collins' mercy. Just lose 1 and you're gone. Tax cut will die, the Obamacare repeal will die, and Trump might as well resign the presidency. And that is all based on the idea that Moore loses. Now, so the answer is you vote for Moore? Well, it's a forlorn hope, folks. He's fallen from 11 points ahead to 12 points behind, and that's in a Republican poll. And also a Fox News poll now has him 8 behind as of yesterday. And obviously reliable, obviously a Republican poll. So give it up, folks. Moore is not going to be the next senator. If he stays on the ballot and is the Republican nominee, the Democrat, Scott, is going to win. Now, we've been down this road twice before, guys, in Indiana and in Missouri in 2010. In both cases, we nominated a good, solid conservative. Todd Atkin in Missouri against Claire McCaskill, the incumbent Democrat, and Richard Murdoch, whose campaign I almost ran. I certainly was a key advisor at his elbow the whole time. And he defeated Lugar, the Republican incumbent senator, a real rhino in the primary. But then in the general, he lost to Joe Donnelly, who is the Democratic candidate. And the only reason Aitken and Murdoch lost is that they said dumb things in the 2 weeks before the election. Murdoch said that when a person was raped, it was God's will, and Aiken said that when a woman is raped, it sets up a process in her body that assures that she won't get pregnant. And those statements were so so nutty, basically, that they both lost the election. Right now, we would have a 4-vote majority in the Senate, except that we lost those 2 seats. And throw in Delaware, where it's a more closer question, but we lost it in part because of that kind of factor. Don't let it happen again, certainly not at this point. I call on Governor Ivey, Kay Ivey, the lieutenant governor of Alabama, who became the governor when the governor resigned a couple of months ago, and I call on her to call a new election, vacate the old one, announce a new election date. It's within her authority to do that. Call a new series of primaries and a new general election and open the door to new candidates. And if she can't do that by executive action, she certainly can do that with the approval of the legislature. And while that's hanging fire, Alabama's vote will be cast by Luther Strange, who I opposed in the primary, but he certainly is at least a solid Republican. And that's the only way to save not just the Republican Party in Alabama, but the whole Trump administration. So she needs to call a new election. If we stick with Roy Moore, if we wait for him to let us go, we're going to lose that seat, just like we lost the seats in Missouri and in Indiana, and we've been paying through the nose for it ever since.
Can you talk a little bit about polls? Because a few people are chiming in saying that polls they're not believable, and Tammy Cole said he's 10 points ahead, not behind. If anyone that knows polls, it's Steve Morris.
I know them well, and I follow them. There is an argument, Tammy, that when University A issues a poll and University B issues a poll, that they're both subject to bias one way or the other. But when both polls are by the same people, and there's a 20-point swing in the poll, there really was a 20-point swing, because they're using the same methodology, the same sampling, the same interviewers. The only thing that's different is the date, which is you're taking one poll a week after the other. And Moore's collapse in Alabama has been so profound that he can't recover from that. He's going to lose. And I don't want to have to wait until Election Day to prove it to you, because it'll be too late then. And if it weren't for the fact that this is crucial, that this seat has to stay Republican. Otherwise, forget about repealing Obamacare, forget about the tax cut, forget about making America great again, in Trump's words, forget about restoring the economy. It's a done deal. And Moore has already been either illegitimately or legitimately smeared badly enough that he can't win this thing. And you just got to proceed on the facts that you're given. And in this case, the answer is to get rid of this choice of candidates and reshuffle the deck for a new choice in a new primary with a new election date set by the governor. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about. Kristen Nielsen is Trump's nominee for the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. And she said something weird. She said, we don't need a border wall from sea to shining sea, from the Pacific Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico. He said there are areas where we could do it based on technology. There are areas where we don't need it because there's not a lot of immigration. Well, the first point is that if you build a wall, immigration's going to go around it and go where there is no wall. That's not rocket science. That's just the way these coyotes and the way the illegal immigrants work. They'll go around the wall, you know, like the Maginot Line in World War II. They'll just flank it, and they'll go where there ain't a wall. And to say that a given area does not have illegal immigrants coming in, that's because there's no obstacle to illegal immigrants. But if you put up a wall somewhere, you will stop them from coming in that route. And to say that you can deal with it by technology is a facile, easy excuse that the left always uses. You don't need a wall. We just need advanced radars and helicopters and so on. Get with the 21st century. Don't do a 14th century wall. Well, all that technology comes with a wall, along with staffing the wall. But you need the wall. You need the barrier. And Trump should withdraw this nomination, because we have no business having the head of Homeland Security be somebody who breaks with the most fundamental proposal that Trump has made in this area, the wall. So I'm sorry I can't take further questions. I got to get going, but Renee will save those questions,
yes,
and we'll talk about them tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
Bye.